So good morning. This is Jeff at the Big Hairy Dog, and this is being recorded. Thank you, William. I just clicked the record button, so we are being recorded. If anybody wants to, I can unmute you. Usually I unmute everybody, but usually I only have 4 or 5 people. So yeah, just there's a chat button. Thank you, William, for using that, by the way. Feel free to jump into the chat and make any comments. If you want to get unmuted, if it's easier to talk, I can unmute you. Obviously, background noise can be an issue. Anyway, this is V9 reporting, version 9 Retail Pro reporting from Big Hairy Dog. My name is Jeff, and so let's take a quick look at reports. This is an agenda. Like I said, I modified it slightly because I didn't like the agenda that was there, and I think we could go a little deeper than the agenda that we had. So let's just start off. So many of you might have been Retail Pro version 8 customers. In that case, you would understand some of the basic report areas. So by that report areas, I mean like summaries, merchandise, journals, right? So I thought we should probably pop over those real fast because all those exist in version 9. So summaries are still summaries. Summaries are still good, solid reports. I mean, I know it's the bottom of the list, but let's face it, everybody runs summaries more than anything else. And summaries are one data type reports, quick, fast. They usually are named, with one exception, by the data type sales, by the level of detail, associate versus department, right? And then what they're doing, right? So if they're bestseller or they're, day of the week or whatever they're trying to do, right? I mean, so most of them are really, they did a good job. Retail Pro, they screwed up on one, and that's the only one I've ever found actually. So you see this receiving report, that's named correctly, by the way, but they threw a receiving report down here at the bottom of the list, which is named summary receiving. So they got their thing backwards here on this one. Usually this would be called receiving summary or receiving merchandise summary, and it's out of place, but that's the only one that I'm aware of anyway. So summaries are still summaries. Merchandise are still merchandise, multi-data type reports typically, right? Lists are still lists. They have added some stuff in there. The central gift cards, all the central functionality there. The security groups functionality has been kind of added, but otherwise departments, vendors, employees, customers, right? Journals are still journals. Journals are really much more powerful in version 9 Crystal reports. But they're still journals. Journals basically about a document. When you run the default journal, you're looking for how many receipts had this item on it, or how many receivings did we have from this vendor, or how many POs do I have out to that vendor, right? That's what a journal is. It's not about the items per se. And then they added this this audit area, and there is some pretty neat stuff in here. Not a great deal, but you can audit people's login and log out and things like that. I don't find a lot of people run those, but occasionally. Anyway, there's 2 other folders that would be in V9 now, could be in V9, and the folders are somewhat regulated by the Oracle database and what's defined in the Oracle database. So whereas I have been able to add other folders to this menu, sometimes they go away if you do a maintenance pack, i.e. upgrade. So it's been problematic to make them stick, shall we say. And that's just awkward. So that being said, there are 2 folders that sit there and are pretty much uninhabited, and that's the custom folder and the other folder. Now the custom folder is the one we bumped into first, and we wrote a bunch of reports and we stuffed them all in there. So when we install our BHD reports, they install into the custom folder. So they're all in one place, and we try to follow the same kind of naming convention. We start off with BHD, and then we give you the data type, like on hand versus receiving versus sales. If there are multiple data types, we put a little DT in there, meaning that there are multiple data types. DT is data types, right? So it could be this year and last year, and on hand, that's 3, right? So there's 2 sales and 1 on hand. Anyway, the other folder is actually the other folder. It's actually called other, and initially that will have nothing in it, although I do think I threw a 1 in by accident. One of my BHD PO reports drops in there I think we fixed that though on new installs. It won't anymore. But the point is that there's this folder sitting out there that is defined in Oracle that is not in use. Now you see when I do big projects for given customers and I build them a bunch of reports, I often will name them appropriately for the customer, and I'll put them in the other folder. So when they go to their other folder, they see all their reports, so that they have one place to look for their reports. And that's kind of a useful tool. In V8, we peppered all the other folders with our reports, and we put little asterisks or whatever on to make them go to the top. And that works, and we could still do that. But then you end up looking in 3 or 4 different folders to find a report where, in this case, all of our reports are in one menu. It's just cleaner, I think. Just my opinion. Anyway, so probably should get on with what we're doing here, right? So back to here then. So let's dive into the nitty gritty, right? So changing reports, Crystal Reports Writer, right? So I wanted to start off with something and make kind of a distinction between what can be done without Crystal and what can be done with Crystal, right? So copying a report does not require Crystal. I'm just going to start off with, if I wanted to make a report and I wanted to make a report about a specific group of items being sold, hypothetically, what I would need to do is I would just need to go find the report I want to copy. So let's say I want to copy this report here, which has probably been hacked up, but this is a good report. And you can see here in the properties up here at the top of the report, you got the report name, type, area, report path. Report path tells you the exact file that needs to be copied. So for instance, if I was going to copy this, I'd need to go find this. Well, it just says summary / RPT S8 item sum, right? But if you know anything about RetailPro, you know that you have either an R drive or a D drive or a network drive. In this case, I have a C drive because this is in fact a virtual machine. So I've just got it on the C drive. So we go into C, we find our RetailPro 9 folder, and in there we find the reports folder. So that's some basics you have to kind of know. And you can see some of the folders I've played around with adding to my menu and then deleted out. But anyway, in here we find the summary folder. So it says summary / RPT S8 item sum, right? So there it is, right there. There's the report. I can just right click this and copy it, and I can go over to any other folder I want, and I can just paste it in here. Now, if you paste it in here, you should be smart and rename the file, because it hasn't been registered yet, so you can do anything you want at this moment. So if I'm running this for, say, let's say that I'm BHD is my company's logo. I usually put the initials here. As you can see, I've done other things up here, and then I put in here like what I'm doing. So if I'm running this for vendor code XYZ, I don't know, you know what I mean? I usually name the report that way. Now what I'm doing here, just so that we all understand, is I'm saying, in the first 3 initials, I'm saying this is my report. In the next section, the middle of that is the root name of the original report, so that if somebody has to recreate this in the future, they know what file to start on, right? That's kind of very helpful. So then, of course, I just give the purpose of the report. Now, anyway, let's get back to how I then copy this and put this in the menu. So right now, this report is in the other folder, but it's not in the other menu, right? It's right here. Now, before we go over to the other menu and register this in, what I want to do is I want to write down all of these values that I have to do. So registering reports, tedious, annoying, but not hard, okay? When we register it, we're going to have to answer anything that says lookup. We're going to have to answer the question. We're going to have to say what the lookup value is. Now, date ranges, numeric ranges, and or logic, those are all supplied by the end user at runtime. Okay, so they don't need to be predefined at all. So, so we need to know all these answers. Now, some of these are pretty easy, like this one here. Invoice type is in fact invoice types. Okay, that's not a hard leap. Anybody could guess that, right? This one's a little harder. Status is in fact invoice status. And most of these, like kit flag is kit flag. Most of these are so easy that it's just painfully. But anyway, do yourself a favor. Before you go and register this, if you know you're copying this report, then come over here and right click, select all, right click, and export. So again, right click and select all. Let the computer do the work. Right click, export to Notepad. Okay, we just wrote down all the answers that I will need to register this report, right? Okay, so then we take and we go over to the menu. Now you don't have to go to the menu that you're registering into, but I do. And the reason I do is so that I don't have to mess with this report type dropdown. I cannot tell you how many times I've registered a report and been in the wrong menu and forgot to change the type to the right menu. Then reports gets confused, the file's in the wrong folder, but yeah, you're saying it's in this folder. It runs, but you can't find it, and it's annoying. So I've just found it's a little simple trick. It's not really required, but it saves you a lot of pain when you're in rushing and you make silly mistakes. Anyway, so we come in here, we make sure we have the register report button on the sidebar here. We go ahead and click register report. It opens up a new report. Now, if this field is grayed out by any chance, it may be that you just ran a report or something and you are in a situation where it's grayed out. If that happens, just click on another report and click register again. It sometimes happens. I'm not sure the exact scenario. It usually involves running a report and being sort of in that after a report ran state with the predefined values still in the report. But anyway, so we're going to put in here, BHD, my initials probably, vendor, XYZ is my vendor code hypothetically, item summary, right? I'm just going to name this however I want to name it. That's just a name. So do what you want there, right? Put your initials in it, whatever works for you. So then go in and find this. Now, obviously, it should be, it's not though, is it? All right, so let's go down and see if we can find it. It's an S8, there it is right there. So we find the report, we highlight it, we click open. Now, when the little SQL hourglass spins, do yourself a favor, just float the mouse down over the report icon on the bottom. Not sure why, that usually speeds that process up like that. So then if we click into the field, again, floating the mouse down typically speeds up the ability to drop in there and lets SQL let go of it basically. So, and of course now it's doing some weird stuff, but all right. And so all of these, like if we tried to save this right now, it would tell us that lookup name cannot be none, right? So all of these nones have to be changed. Now, when you start typing here, it should index, but the first one, you're gonna have to hit the backspace a couple times, get rid of that none. Now I could go ahead and type invoice S, and it finds invoice status, right? So now it becomes for me a trick of knowing exactly the fewest number of keys I can press to get where I'm going, right? Now, what I'm doing here, and I'm not sure why it's hopping around and funny, this virtual machine does weird things sometimes anyway. Here, all I'm doing is hitting the right arrow once. It seems to skip over the middle field. So basically, if you type EMPLOYEEN, that's names, right? And it pops over now. I'm not sure why mine's playing games with me, probably because I'm on a webinar, but usually then it pops down to the next row and I just hit the right arrow. Now in this case, I'd also have to hit the down arrow to find the next lookup value, right? So this is, like I said, this is annoying, but it's not hard. So if you get stuck, like SBS, if I look for SBS, it's not going to find anything, right? I know that it's SUBS, it's subsidiaries, but if I was totally stuck, right, I could just come back here and take a look in here and find SBS number and say, oh, the answer is subsidiaries. Oh, all right, I could type that, right? Easy to do. So not to drag this out, but to make sure we understand, I really want to get to the next step. I'm not going to keep this report in my menu, but I want to register it just enough to get you to the next point where you understand how to finish it, right? So bear with me for a quick second. Let me just dump these other ones in as quickly as possible. DCS is pretty easy. Vendor code is slightly annoying. You got to get to the C in vendor code for it to find correctly. These are inventory fields, so you have to know that they're inventory UDF3. Now there's another nice trick that goes with these though. as we've said, if you type I, you get things that start with I, right? Well, if you type a letter that it doesn't recognize, like X, it doesn't know what to do with that. So it just pops the drop down menu and says, "Ooh, dude, I don't know where to go." And I say, "Yeah, okay, down arrow and press enter," right? And then I can do that again and again. So down here you see that for those UDF fields, user defined fields and auxiliary fields, right? There are a great many of those. And you can just hit the X key and down arrow and then right arrow, and it does its little thing, right? And you don't have to keep typing the word inventory in over again and over again. So X down arrow, enter, and then X down arrow, enter. And then I usually hit the right arrow, but it seems to, again, my cursor is doing funny things on this virtual machine. I honestly haven't seen that anywhere else except this virtual machine. All right, so I skipped a few up here. Again, it's not going to be nice and friendly. If you skip some lookup fields, it's going to catch you. So discount reasons, right? And this is the hardest one. If you don't have a cheat sheet and you don't know the answer to that one, you won't find it. The answer is active, but it's not just active, it's is active. That's one of the first ones I ran into trouble with when I first got certified and I was first registering one of my first reports. I had to actually bail and escape out and go look that one up because I could not find it in the menu. I went up and down the list, and you can browse the list if you want to. Like, I know this is SU, but if I wanted to open this up and just scroll up and down it, right, I could do that. But when you're not sure what you're looking for, that's awkward, right? It's better if you know the answer, and it's so easy to export the answers out, right? So why wouldn't you? All right, so anyway, that's all of them. See, these down here are all and/or numeric range. Everything else seems like it's been satisfied. So we click save, right? And this report gets registered into Oracle. And sometime soon in our lifetime, prompts us. And this is taking a little longer than it usually takes. We probably won't be registering another report though. So what we're waiting for is the little prompt that says it was successful. Okay, boom. And then it comes back and asks you, do you want to do another one? And I'm going to say no. Now, immediately upon saving this report into the menu, the whole point of this exercise was to filter this report to a specific group of data, right? So on the bottom left, it says filter. So there are two modes. This is, in fact, the old reports designer. There was a reports designer in version 9.1. This menu was much bigger. It had sort and had layouts. It had all kinds of stuff. I tried it. It blew up. It was not good. Oh, excellent question, Robert. Why does it have to be entered manually? Well, what's going on there? So Robert asked the question. I should let everybody know what it is, right? If copying the report, why does it have to be entered manually? Remember that what we've got going on here is we've got a Resell Pro using a proprietary Oracle database. So what we're doing is we're taking a regular Crystal RPT report file, and we are connecting it up to the Oracle database. So whereas in version 8 and previous versions, version 5, 6, 7, those are all the versions that I was using mostly, we had our own database. I mean, our database was our database. It was a flat file database right there in the Retail Pro directory, right? So now, just to give you a lay of the land here, if we back up, in the old days, our database would have been right here in this folder. There would be data files right in here. In V8, I can go show you in V8, in fact, the data files are right in the RPro folder. You scroll in here, you'll find DAT files, right, that are actually our data files. So that meant that we had unrestricted direct access to the data files anytime we want. It also meant that nobody was watching our back, and we had, reconstruct corruption issues. I mean, there's pros and cons. The flat file is very nimble, but it's also a little bit dangerous. So in Oracle, of course, now we have our data is in the Oracle folder, in the Aura data folder. Our database is called RPro ODS, and that is our database. And there is the database files, the DBF files right there. So in order to get to these, we have to go through this program called Oracle. We have to connect and request data, and we have to hand it off to Oracle. So all the data is in there, all the fields are in there, and we have to officially connect those, basically, because Crystal Reports is a third-party application. Although they tried to write a report designer, they realized that rewriting Crystal was just dumb, and that Crystal was far better than anything they could write, and they just finally caved and said, okay, guys, use Crystal. I'm not sure it was not a good move, actually, because they could never write a program as good as Crystal Reports. I'm pretty good at it, and there's just mountains of information that I don't even know. So I'm just going to tell you that there's a lot in there. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question. So we have to register it once. Now, let's finish, and I'm going to come back to that whole registering once thing in a second, but let's finish this thing. So we've got it halfway done. So we have copied the file and registered it in there, but we have not given this report purpose. So the point was to filter this to a vendor, right? So on the bottom, I'm going to go into filter mode. Now here's a remnant of the old designer. It shows you these fields. You can't do anything with fields. On the top right, it says criteria. So if we go into criteria, it lets you see the parameters or filter, right? So I'm just going to pick any vendor. I don't think I actually have a vendor called XYZ, but these are alphabetical in this mode. So vendor code is going to be at the bottom, starting with V. So I'm just going to grab something in here. I have no idea what this data is, in fact. So, all right, we're just going to, is there anything that's better? Oh, you know, while we're in here too, if you drop down, nope, it's not going to mess with, it's not going to let me do that. All right, fine. All right, I'm just going to try and hope that we have some data in there for that. So we'll pick something pretty big. Anyway, invoice type, okay? Invoice type is a field that's in many of these reports, and it regulates high security receipts. So aborted sale, should an aborted sale be in this report? I'm going to say no. So I'm going to say I only want to see regular, and I check off return, although nobody really makes return transactions anymore. The item return function in Retail Pro 9 is outstanding and sort of makes the whole return transaction thing pointless, but still it is a valid transaction. So I check it off. The other one I would be concerned with seeing is the status one. So the status one again says, do reversed voided transactions count? No, they don't. Only normal transactions count, right? So these are in many, many reports. Journals, many summaries have these. So when you're running, if you don't pay attention to these, you end up running and including data that was not intended to be included, right? So, all right. So then in here also, while we're here, it probably would not be a bad idea to set up a date range. You know, short date, what's the difference between short date range and long date range? Time. That's the difference between short and long. Short just has dates, long has time. So mostly we don't use long unless you're like a casino and your day changes at 3 a.m. And so you need to run for 2 days, but ending at 3 a.m. and then starting at 3 a.m. the next day or something like that, wacky, right? So normally we would just simply go in here and set this to whatever date range we need, like a dynamic date range of say 30 days, 30 days ago. My data is so poor because this is a sandbox and I don't really make transactions that I'll run it for 365 starting 365 ago and hope that I have anything in there at all. So we'll try a year, save changes, save, yep. Now when you save this filter, these parameters, and then click report, it's going to kick you out. It's just going to kick you all the way out, and then we have to go back in and find our report. So anyway, in here then, here's my BHDXYZ item summary, right? And if I now click run, all of those things I put in there, all the parameters I put in there, the type, the status, the vendor code, the date are all coming up automatic now, right? That's the whole point of copying a report, right? And there is actually a little bit of data in there. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, well, one page with a total. I wasn't expecting a lot, but okay, right? So that there can be done without the use of Crystal at all. Now, in here, to come back to that question about that registration thing, which I'm going to agree with you, it's annoying. And I was really intimidated by with the whole Oracle Fields thing back in the day when I first started this, but it's just come to be an annoying task for me that's pretty quick, actually, not that painful. Now, once done, okay, then if I had more than one location, I could export this out. So if I export this out, it says, do you want to export with the default filter values? So the date range I supplied, the invoice type field, the status field, and the vendor code, right? Well, yes, of course I would. It's the whole point of this thing, right? So if you click yes, it exports it out. Now what it does for us is it goes and makes us a set of files that go into export out. So Retail Pro 9 export out. That's the path where it exports to. Now you can see that right here at the top, let's see. Okay, it's just messing with us here, isn't it? I got a lot of stuff in my export folder. I probably should have deleted that stuff. In fact, let's just do that. Let's just say select all, delete, yes. Let's just make this cleaner, right? So let's pop back in here and do that again. Export, yes. Okay, successful. Pop back in here, and now it's much easier to see what's going on, right? So it exports the report that we copied and the encrypt file. Now these two here could be taken to the other store, and then in reports, you would just have to go import and then find it wherever you put it. So we know it's still sitting in the export out, right? And now here you notice you can't see the RPT, you can only see the registration file. So all that registration work we did one time will then be redone by that encrypt file. So we'll only have to do it the one time, then we can export, import, export, import. And I would certainly export it and copy those two files to a folder of your choice as a backup. I mean, I would not take the time to create a report and not back it up, because if it breaks, I want to be able to just drop it back in. I don't want to have to relive this whole adventure, if that makes sense to everybody. And I have seen a weird thing that I've tried to get it handled, but sometimes if reports gets locked up and I don't know what causes it. I saw it happen once in front of me, and you're on a report and you ran a report, and then you come back in to run another report, and whatever has happened, I wish I could recreate it. Anyway, when you click on another report, the one that you had on the screen dumps over the top of the other one. And then when you try and run this one, you get the invalid number of parameters or something, an error message. And then when I get involved as a tech and look at it and I download the report and you say, hey, it's a department summary, and I open it up, it's a shift report for time clock or something. It's an unrelated report that got overwritten. I've only seen it happen, I'm going to say a dozen times, and not recently. The current version seems to, I haven't seen it recently, and then current 9.4, but I have seen it. I have seen reports break. So if you're going to take the time to build one, export it, take those two files, take them over to your install folder, create a backup reports folder or something, put them in there so that you have them backed up. I mean, it's just so easy to do. Why wouldn't you, right? All right, so now let's talk about Crystal and get into some more of the Crystal stuff, right? So we know how to copy and register a report. Any report you build in Crystal that's new is going to have to be registered the same way. I think we've been through that once. I don't think we need to live through that again. Okay, so now, if you were going to go build a report like this report here, we've been hacking it up. Okay, I'm good with hacking it up more. If I have Crystal installed, I've got the little funny little icon there. This little icon here that's represented for Crystal shortcuts, and I can just double click this, and it will open this report in Crystal. So that's Crystal reports right there. So the first thing that you would want to know about it is that on the top here, this little icon, the Field Explorer, I think it's also View in here. Yeah, Field Explorer right there. So you can either use the View or the shortcut key. I just go to the shortcut key. But the Field Explorer is extremely important. You spend all your time in the Field Explorer and the report. Okay, that's where you spend all your time. So I'm just going to tell you that the Field Explorer cannot underline it enough that that is very, very important. So in here, you got three things. You got your data fields. Here's all the data fields that this report or query has. We're going to come back to the query in a minute, but here's all of the fields that you can put in this report, right? And right below it is formulas, very, very powerful tool. You got to know those. And then your parameters, okay? So parameters are filter criteria that are on this report. Also very important side note, at the bottom is the header and filter. This is what prints your filter criteria in reports when you say print on the header or print on the footer. I'm going to actually point at that real fast because that's an annoying thing. But under options here on the sidebar, workstation preferences, under appearance, this will default to none. You have to turn it on to first or last page, or you will not see the parameter. So if you run a report today, it'll say it was printed today on the top of the report, right? But it will not say what date range it ran for. Okay, so then another question we got from Robert is the same ability to export to PDF or Excel. Yes, but that's secondary. So when you export it, the RPT, you're exporting the actual guts. You're like taking the engine and exporting it out so you have a backup engine. But if you use that engine and run the reports and you have data, that's where you'd export to PDF and Excel. But yeah, that's native to all reports. Once you register any report into reports. So real quick here, you got to make sure you got the first page turned on, and you got to make sure that you're printing. This will also default off. Print range will not be turned on. And you want to make sure both those get turned on and saved. Periodically, maintenance packs or something turns them off. You have to go back in. I don't know. It'll be fine for 2 years and it'll turn off and you'll have to turn it on. You know what I mean? But just be aware that that is a function you can just turn on. You don't have to actually go and do anything. So secondarily here, let's just pop back in here and just get that question answered and we'll get back on with things. So here, if I run this report, and I don't know what it looks like to be honest. Oh yeah, we just ran it. So it's decent. It's not that bad. All right, so if I run it, then right here is where you would export. And this would be exporting out to Excel or PDF, the results of the engine, not the engine itself. Although there is that option in there. Right, so if I export it to Crystal Reports 11, it will export an RPT file with the data. So if you wanted to send me your data and the RPT, that's how you would do it. I haven't found a great deal of usages for that. I just dial in and look at it if there's a problem. So, but this is where you export the results to PDF or Excel, not the actual report itself, usually. Anyway, so back here in Crystal. So these little header footer things have to be at the bottom. If they're not at the bottom, you will get an error that says failed to retrieve data. And we're going to circle back on that in a bit here, but you can just right click here and say set parameter order and you can see them. So if this was up here like that, like floating in space like that, that would cause an error at runtime. And then there's a way that happens, but we're not there yet. So I don't want to make it too confusing. I'm just pointing out that you can move those for now. And of course the OK key is actually off the screen, sort of very annoying. There it is on the bottom. So on the bottom right, you see that. Now, also when you first go into this function, honestly, the window is going to be ridiculously small. It's going to be like this big. So the first thing you have to do if you ever go to change your parameter order is just make the window a lot bigger, right? So you can actually see what's going on, right? I'm going to click OK at the bottom. All right, so let's go back to the field. So you can see in here, department class, subclass, description 1, 2, 3, attribute size, dates, max percent discounts, all your UDF fields, all your extended values, original price, discount, price, cost, margin, price. Now the price exists, it's an awkward one, okay? Price exists in 4 versions. So you've got 2 issues going on with price. You got those European guys, so you got VAT or with tax, right? So you got price and price with tax. But then you also have global discounts. So so down here further, we're going to find additional, let's see, where are they here? Now, another trick, might as well use it while we're looking, right? If I'm on a given value and I type a letter like E, it's going to take me to the first occurrence of the next field that starts with E. So if I want to review the E fields like extended, okay, there's extended price WGD, that's extended price with global discount. Now that probably for us is the most accurate price field. So if I have a discount on the top and I have a discount on the bottom of the transaction, so I've got 10% on the item and I've got 10% on the subtotal, that's technically a 19% discount because $10 off 100 is 90 and $10 off 90 is 9 more, right? Math sneaks up on you when you're not looking. So, if I want to see that subtotal discount spread back in and see a true margin, I need to use the with global discount value, right? And obviously there's a, right below it, you see the extended price with tax with global discount version. So there's 4 of those. I usually gravitate to that one, with some exceptions here and there. When you get into like weird Canadian tax situations, sometimes it doesn't work out well for you. But that's a tricky one. All right. So anyway, there's all your fields. These fields here, all these fields here, and tax arrays are in there now too. That's pretty cool. Did not realize that. Yeah. All right. So okay. Now any one of these fields, I think this is obvious, but any one of these fields you could just left click, drag, drop it in wherever you want, right? That's simple to add a field. All right. So let's talk about some of the structure of the report here. So, well, common changes, let's start with the common changes. I guess we should do this right. Common changes would be moving stuff around. So if you've ever used the doc designer, you can move stuff around by just clicking on it, holding the shift key, clicking on the adjoining field, right? Then I can use the shift key and left arrow that resizes, or I can just take the mouse and I can grab it and I can resize the whole thing, right? So shift right arrow, see it's getting bigger or smaller, or I can make it taller or shorter, right? Now, let's do this. Let's screw this up. Okay, now these 2 are tied, so I can't screw this one up. Let's see if I can get one that's not tied here. Well, these are all tied. All right, so let's just do this. I'm going to delete this column header here. Okay, I'm going to copy this one here. I'm going to paste it in there. Now, column headers are just text fields, right? That's all they are. So I'm just going to call this one size. Now I deliberately disconnected the 2. Normally when you add a field, so let's add a field, and you drop it in like this, you see how it pops the header in right there? So I dropped this field in and it popped this header in for me, right? So when I do that, those 2 are tied together and they change size together, which is actually really brilliant and wonderful, and I like that a lot. Not saying it's a bad thing, but that being said, if they become disconnected, because I put my headers in, and I put my headers in all the time, right? And they are of a different size, like they are now. Like this one is way too big, right? And wow, it's actually chasing that one there too. That's weird. All right. Anyway, the result can be when you export to Excel that the data hops columns and they don't line up correctly, right? So it's very important that when you're in here and you're going through these, that you take and hold the shift key down, click on one field, hold the shift key down, right click there and say align left, and right click again and say same width, right? Make them be perfectly in a line and not overlapping the next field. You guys with me on that? If you line everything up and everything looks pretty, it will export pretty. If you don't, it will export very messy. That simple. Now, if you ever have a situation where like down here, your grand total is here, but if this ends up exporting and lining up with ALU, for instance, and then the quantity ends up lining up with vendor code, what you need to do is you need to plug those holes. That's all you need to do. And honestly, about 95% of the time it doesn't happen that way. Every now and then I get a report that does, but all you do is you just go here, copy a text field, you right click, you paste, put the text field down here, right? You then make the text field be all blanks, just a couple of blanks. I just put 3 blanks in there, right? Then you line that up with the field above it, right? You plug the hole, right? So we say align left, right click again, and same width. And I could repeat that. I could copy this and line it up with vendor code and description, or I could make this one line up with description. You see what I mean? If I plugged all the little holes, it would push this over to export in the column that it should be exporting in. Usually grand totals don't have that problem. I've seen it with subtotals mostly here and there, not that often. But FYI, it's not that hard to fix. It's just like a couple of minutes in here. All right, so common moves would be to, like I said, move something around. I want to get rid of UPC. I don't want my UPC. Most people aren't 100% UPC, and I want to move things over. So like here, it's just kind of a mess. I see if that's not connected. No, so I move this over. I want size to print there. I want the column header to go with it, right? So I'm just going to right click. And the difference in the Doc Designer and Crystal is in the Doc Designer, it matters what field you click on first. In the Crystal, it doesn't. You right click on the field you're anchoring to. So I right click on the actual size field and say align left, it just aligns left, right? And then if I move this over, and of course, this here would actually not print. I'm going to move it down. I'll explain that in a second. We're going to get to grouping here shortly. And then I take this here, and now again, I right click on the anchor point and say, if I can get to right click here, my mouse is being touchy these days. All right, fine, we'll do it by hand. All right, so I say align left, it moves that over for me. And of course, right click again, same width, boom, lines that up, right? Then I could take like a description 2. Now, this is the detail. The D in the center is the detail band. We're going to talk about these groupings next here, but the detail band is the native band. So if I drop this in here, see it adds the header for me, then I could bring this down and keep the header. Now the header is not formatted correctly, so we need to clean all that up, right? So here I could just go like this and say, use the format painter. Now I've got a caps and lower issue that I could retype that in if I want. I also have an alignment issue, right? So I'd have to go ahead and shift and right click and align top and adjust the height. This is the tedious part, making everything line up. And then down here, usually I don't use the painter. You could. I've had some issues created by the painter, so I kind of steer clear of it. I just go to format and I just go to font and set the font. Usually Arial 8, Arial 10, whatever I'm in the mood for or the customer would like. This looks like it might be bigger though. Let's see, what is this one? This one is not set. Oh, we got 2 fields, right? So this one's probably 9. I'm guessing if we make this 9, they'll both line up. Yeah, there we go. Now, so some of these here are different fonts over here. And we got description 2 in there twice. That's weird. Okay. If I wanted to clean this up, I could do it much quicker by right-clicking over here and saying select all objects. And then I could just go ahead and say align top, size, same height, format all the fields together. Now if I just go in and say I want these to be 9-pitch regular, they're all 9-pitch regular. And we're going to check this description 2 here in a second. All right, so let's talk about, so that's, I guess, common changes. Mostly is just moving things around, making them pretty or line up. Now, let's talk about, in version 8, it would have been called sorting. And sorting in version 8, we always, initially think of it as alphabetizing. It's not alphabetizing. Alphabetizing does occur from sorting, but that's a secondary function. The primary function of the sort in version 8 was to set the level of detail, right? So to say group first by department, and then within the department break it down by vendor, then within the vendor break it down by style, then within the style break it down by color, right? To drill down into the data. That was the sort in version 8. That's the function of sorting, right? So that is defined by grouping. Okay, up here on the top it says group experts, a little equal sign right here. And I believe you can also go into, nope, wrong one. I'm in the virtual machine. Insert, nope. Format, nope. I never go in this way, can you tell? There is a group expert up here, but I'm not finding it. Oh, there it is right there, report group export. So that's the place you'd go if you were going to go and do it through the menus. I just use the equal sign up here because it's right there in the bar. Anyway, so this here defines the drill down. So this report here currently, and this is not default, I've hacked this up, but currently it's grouping by the department, class, and then subclass, as opposed to the DCS field, which I could have used, right? There is such a field here, I believe, someplace in there. There it is, DCS code. So I could have replaced these first three levels with just one field, right? But then I could not subtotal by D alone, could I? That's a choice, right? Anyway, so there's no difference in the drill down if I do D, C, and S versus DCS, right? It still gets you to the same end piece of data down here, right? So, so this report currently would end at color. So this report, the way it's grouping now, it groups by department, vendor, style, color, and stops there. Just says for that style, the black one sold X and the white one sold Y, right? That's what that does. It does not show us the size. That's why size wasn't clearly in that level. And when I was putting it in there earlier, it was actually a mistake, but I didn't look at the grouping, right? So if I wanted to group further, I could go over here to the ALU and say, okay, next I want to group by ALU, which would be the size. But you know, if we input our data correctly when we save it, the small gets a skew before the medium, and the medium gets a skew before the large. If I actually group this by size, which would end up sorting it by size secondarily, right? Then it's going to sort alphabetically by size, which I'm not sure is a good thing, right? Because it's going to go large, medium, small, extra large, alphabetically correct, right? So I usually roll the dice on the fact that people out there have good data practices when they input and they input it correctly, and that the small has a lower skew so that it'll display in the right order. That's just another trick though. Now the tiebreaker, as always in any of this report design, is the item SID or the document SID or whatever piece of data you're working with. There should always be an item SID out here to group by, right? So that there would ensure that you got down to a unique item, right? So if for some reason you had an ALU and you sold it and then you ended up reusing that ALU or something for some reason, right? And it mixed that data together, that would not be mixed. That would always be your tiebreaker. So anyway, that's your drill down, right? So if we click OK, it inserts those other groups. Now, what you get is you get headers and you get footers. So GH and GF, right? The header and the footer. Now, in V8, we didn't really have headers and footers. So normally, I just suppress these. Now, in suppress, there's suppress and there's hide. The difference is that hide, if you're running a report in Crystal, lets you unhide. It lets you expose that lower layer of data. So if you're planning on running these in Crystal directly, then you would want to use the hide. If you're planning on running them in Retail Pro, just suppress them and be done with it. Right, so now this becomes level 8 here. The item SID level becomes our level of detail, and that's actually redundant for level 7, so I'm going to suppress level 7, right? I don't need level 7. So then, of course, I don't know if I want a subtotal here. I probably don't actually, so I'm going to suppress this one, and then I'm just going to right-click and select all items and move them up into my level of detail, right? Now, I have quantity in there, but I don't have extended price or cost or margin. Now, there's a couple ways we could do that. Like I could come up here and say, insert a summary, and in here I could say, no, it's not vendor code. It is extended price, and I do not want maximum, I want sum, and I want it to go to level 8. Okay, there we go. I just inserted the summary correctly. Now I'm going to do cost, but I'm going to do it easier. So that's the formal way to do it, right? I go up and say insert a summary. I find it much more productive to click on the field, right click and say insert the summary right here. And the reason is because it fills the two boxes on the top in. Like it already says cost and it already says sum. All I got to do is say, okay, what level do I want it at? Boom, done. I also find that I make a lot less mistakes when I do it this way. When I go like this and I say insert the summary, sometimes when I was doing it the other way, when I first started, I would forget and leave this on max. And that would cause a problem in the report, and then in the final subtotals and everything would get blown up, and then I'd have to go in and dig it out and find the mistake and fix it. So I've just found that it's been a lot more accurate overall if I just do it. It's a lot quicker too. So anyway, now that builds our fields, right? Now down here at this point, we've got this margin percent field, but now margin percent fields, we can't do this to a percent field. Now, technically that percent field and the one that we're about to create is actually the same probably, but there's no guarantee, and certainly not if you go up to like department level, right? If we wanted to subtotal this by department, so if we scroll down a little bit here and we say that our first grouping level is by department, right? So if I don't even have a department in here, nice. But if I wanted to insert totals, right? If I wanted to say insert a summary at level 1, right? Boom. I cannot add, if one item is 45% margin and the next item is 55% margin, that does not mean the subtotal is 100%, right? That means it's somewhere between 45 and 55, right? So with margin and things like margin, like percent of increase or discount percent or any of those calculations, we have to redo the calculation. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of these, and I'm going to go ahead and insert this here at the level 1 level. And I find that you're much better off to have all these values done, especially if you're just starting out in Crystal Reports. Do yourself a favor, get all the values built in before you start playing with formulas. So, so I'm going to put all these things in so there, both levels. And if I was going to be nice to myself, what I probably should do is get the department code, put that in here too, because that's what this actually is, right? That's the department code. And if I want to be really nice to myself, I could put the department name in there too, right? I would not use the full department name or the C and the S because this is just D, right? This level here is just department. This one's class. So, all right, now it's not pretty. I know these are bold and these are small and etc. But we're not worried about that right now. So let's first deal with how do you write a formula to add margin percent. Okay, well let's go over here first and see what do we got in formulas. In formulas, you see that there is, like right here, a subsidiary margin percent. If I double click that, that looks like Greek. I'm just going to tell you that looks like straight up programming, doesn't it? We're going to recreate this, then we're going to come back and look at this in a second. And then you tell me if it's straight up programming, because it looks pretty intimidating. I mean, it looks totally ridiculous, doesn't it? All right, so I'm going to say new here. I right-clicked, said new. Notice that they started with little F's. It's a thing they do. You don't have to do it. I do it. So I put a little F in there that alphabetically groups them together in the menu when you're looking for the formulas. It's kind of handy, I'm just going to say. I'm going to say MRG percent, and then I'm going to say item. Like so, when I rename this and create another version of it, I just want to have to change the last 4 letters, right? I don't want to have to retype the whole thing. So I put the level at the end so that I can quickly alter that as I duplicate this formula. Anyway, so I'm going to click OK. It opens up. Okay, let's just start with the math, right? So up here you've got the Retail Pro fields and you've got the report fields. Now we built all our report fields, right? We put them all in both levels, right? So we are good. So let's open up the report fields. And there we see group 1 and group 8, right? So group 8 is our item and group 1 is our department, right? If you remember from our groups, okay? So let's just start with the math, the simplest thing of all, right? So first off, what is margin? Well, it's the margin dollars divided by the price, right? So if I have $60, my price is 100, my cost is 40, therefore my margin is 60. 60 divided by 100 goes in 0.6, which would be represented at 60% margin, right? Okay, so then at group level 8, the margin amount, right, divided, so I'm adding a slash, right? I type a slash, by price. Okay, that's margin right there. Now that's going to express as 0.6, right? But I need to express as 6D, right? 60. So what I need to do is I need to say, okay, go ahead and put a bracket over there, go over here to the beginning, put a bracket on the left, and say, okay, can I multiply that by 100, right? Okay, now that's technically correct. That's going to be 60%, and I add a little percent sign to the formatting, and it looks damn pretty. What if, though? What if we sold a unique special item that's in a special order department or whatever, and we actually sold it for zero price? We gave it away. So now I'm dividing by zero, right? Okay, that's not going to work. Division by zero blows the report up and stops everything in its tracks and says, error, division by zero, right? So I've got to say, look, dude, if this is a zero, then don't do the math, right? So I've got to say if then. I've got to put an if then in here. So what I do is I say if, and there's two levels to this, but I'm going to start simple, I guess. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm just going to say if. I'm going to put a left bracket here, and I'm going to say if the margin, if the price here, the price we're worried about, if the price, double click it, right? You don't have to type any of this crap, right? If that equals zero, right? Then you can go ahead and do this math, right? I don't have a problem with proceeding if it okay, I have to do this right. I have to say if it does not equal zero. I guess I got to put that in there correctly. So if this does not equal zero, then do the math. And at the bottom I can say else, i.e. if it does equal zero, then let's just call it zero, right? So that's an if-then statement. If this field does not equal zero, then take the margin divided by the price, multiply it by 100. But if it does equal zero, then go to the else statement and say zero. Now, there's the chance that in fact it's not a zero. There's another value it could be that could also cause a problem, and that's called a null. So a null is the absence of a zero. It's the absence of everything, right? But that is technically a value to a computer, so the statement actually would need to take into account both those. So I'm going to come over here and put another little bracket, and we're going to insert. I'm going to say not is null, and then we're going to go ahead and double click this field, and then we're going to close off our stuff and put a little and in there. So now I'm going to read this back. Now this here, which is a double negative, and it just drives me nuts forever, but all right, whatever. That's an Oracle status. That's a way of being in Oracle, right? So I'm saying if not this thing called is null, this field here, right? And it does not equal zero, then go ahead and do the math. Else zero, right? And that's all we're doing here. Now, the beauty of this, and I'm going to test this. I'm going to hit the X2 here and test it. No errors found. By the way, if we have a left bracket here and we have a left bracket here and we have a left bracket here, you better have three right brackets over here, right? If you don't, and you click the little X here, it's going to catch you. It's going to say you're missing a right bracket. It's not going to tell you where. It's just going to say you're missing one. If you can't find it, just scrap the whole thing, start over. It's easier. All right, so if we save and close this now, and I double click this again and look back here, if not is null, this field, and the sum of this field is not equal to zero, then do the math, else zero, right? Exactly the same. See, the beauty of that is you don't have to remember it. You can pretty much look at any report that the programmers wrote when they wrote these and just open it up and go, oh yeah, I got that. That simple. And we're not typing any of this stuff. We're just double clicking fields, right? So for us in writing formulas, it's about knowing the math. That's what it's about. It's not about writing programming stuff. It's about knowing how to calculate margin or percent of increase or discounts, right? That's what it is. Now, this field here is done. I could put this one in. I could say that's the right level. That's going to show the correct margin. Now, but I need one for down here, right? I need to get one in the department level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this one and say duplicate that, and I'm going to change it. I'm going to click in here and back out that item, right, and say department. Okay, and I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to press enter again, and it opens up. Now, there's the same thing we just wrote, but the problem is it's not at the department level, it's at the item level. So how do I find out how to fix it and make it be at the department level? Well, what I usually do is I just move my cursor down, don't mix it up in the middle of your formula, find a department value like price or margin or something, double click it and take a look at it. Okay, the difference, so this says sum this field at this level, and this says sum this field at this level, right? So the difference is the level, right? So I copy this here, I get rid of this inserted like trailing thing, I find the level in each piece, and I just Control Victor, I paste over the top of it, Control Victor, Control V again, and Control V here. So I just changed that formula to now be at the department level without having to redo all the painful math, right? That's a no-brainer way to hop a formula up. So save. Now what I'm going to do is hop it up to the next level for you. So I'm going to go ahead and say duplicate again, and this time I'm going to say that we want this one to be GT, grand total, okay? And I'm going to press enter on that. Now to move this to the grand total, we're not going to be replacing this level. We're going to be removing. So there's a regular bracket, and then there's a little like a squiggly bracket, which would be on the keyboard. It would be the shift bracket to the right of the P. If you look at the right of the P, the top ones, the shift ones there, the ones that have the little point on them. Anyway, so from that little point, this one here, back to this comma, that defines the level. So what we're going to do is just going to get rid of the level. We're just going to say, look, the total sum of this field, no level involved, sum it all the way to the bottom, right? That's a grand total, right? So if I say delete the level off all four of these statements, I'd now have a grand total. Boom. There's your grand total version. And if you click save and exit, it'll also check for errors, but I'm going to check for errors just so that I can be sure that I didn't screw that up. I'm going to click save and close. So now I've got all three. I could drop this in. Of course, I already had a grand total one here, but we'll use mine because mine's better. Right. So then, of course, we would need to go ahead and do the alignments and all that stuff. Right. So with formulas are so powerful. I cannot even tell you how powerful they are. I've played with them. Let me give you an example real quick. Align left, size, same width, boom. So if I wanted to, let's say hypothetically that I'm running this report and I want to compare, say store one is my big store. And this here is showing the total sold for the entire company. Okay, so maybe I just say this is CMP up here, right? I give it a little different column header, right? And I want to see right next to it what sold in only one of my stores, store one, hypothetically. Okay, align left, adjust width, right? Boom, boom. I can also change the size a little bit, play around with it. I could also then make this column header bigger, taller, right? Do whatever you want now, right? Okay, so now just for an exercise in formula manipulation here, right? I want to see right there in front of the company quantity sold, I want to see just store one. So I could come up here and say new, right? And I could say right click new, little f, store one QTY, right? And I could go in here and now I could close the report fields and I can open up the Retail Pro fields, right? And in here, let's see what I can find here. Okay, store code, store number. Okay, right there. So if I said in here, if double click store number equals 1, then go up and find the quantity. And of course, you can never find what you want when you want it. Okay, QTY, then quantity, right? And spaces don't matter, but they do to us human beings, right? Else 0. So I'm testing to see what store it is, and if it is store 1, then I want the quantity, else I want 0, right? So now if I save that, and I insert that into my detail level right here, right? I could then say insert this as a summary to level 1 and to level 8. Now, and we probably should insert it all the way at the bottom, right? Insert summary to GT grand total. Boom, there it is at the bottom. Now, at this point, I want to test it. I hope you see, though, how powerful formulas are. They're just, if you can think of it, you can do it in a formula. I've done some really weird stuff. The aging reports, what I did there is I built a formula that subtracts the last received date from the current date and derives a number, like 37 days. Then from there, I can say if it's less than 180 days, it goes in this column. If it's more than 180 days, it goes in that column, and so forth, right? You can just go on and on with this. So now, as I build these things, from time to time, I need to see how they're looking, right? So I need to preview them. If you're going to be previewing it, you want to save it. Before you preview it, you want to save it. I cannot stress that enough. I have previewed reports and had them blow up, and it's not good, okay? You lose all your work. So save your report. Then right up at the top here, the fourth little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth icon in print preview. There's next to it is an HTML previewer. Don't mess with that. The print previewer is what you want. So we click print preview. There are 3, technically for you guys 4, but there are 3 required fields. Okay, these are non-negotiable. Okay, so this one here, this extended cost field at the top has to be set to true or false. This is not a filter parameter per se. It is tied to the security in Retail Pro. So if you don't give yourself access to see this, you will not be able to see it, right? So you want to say true. You have to have a destination subsidiary that has to be set to 1. And there is another field here called employee ID that has to be set to 1. Not all 3 of those fields, the employee ID, the destination subsidiary, and the cost field, not all 3 of those fields actually exist in all the reports, okay? So some reports only have 1, some reports have none. Actually, most all reports have the destination subsidiary. So most of them you will have to do the subsidiary. Most of the other ones don't have the other 2, but some do. Okay. Now for you guys have real data. I don't have real data. I could fire this off right now. I got a sandbox. I got junk, right? So it doesn't matter what I do. But for you guys, especially if you have a lot of data, you do not want to run this wide open. You want to run it with the date range. Now the date range is pretty simple. What do I have in here? Oh, that's our little export. Good. We don't need that anymore. Let's get rid of this. Okay, the date range basically needs to have a true / false, or actually not really true and false. It's more like include / exclude is what it is, comma, date 1, comma, date 2. So that's the format that it has to be in, okay, except that I can't get my capitals correct here, right? So you have to be able to say whether it's include or exclude. That's done with a numeric value, by the way. Then in quotes, in single quotes, not double quotes, a date separated by a comma and another date, right? So the correct way you would type it in there would be, I want to include, comma, quote, I'm going to say 1/1/2017, quote, comma, quote. And again, I have no data, so I can do a crazy date period here, right? 3/31/2020 quote, right? Let's see if that works. And I wanted to do it here in Notepad because it's just a lot easier for everyone to see if we do it here in Notepad, right? So I'm going to copy this here and we're going to go try it out. So create short date. You can do it in either one, but I don't want to deal with time really. Although if you put this in long date, it would work. You don't have to put the time in. But all right, so we're going to go ahead and put that in there and we're going to click OK at the bottom. If it didn't work, it would fail. It's now prompting for the password. So FYI, while we're all at it here, you have the database is called RPro ODS, and there are two O's in there. So I deliberately did the lowercase to make sure you get the distinction. There are two O's in there. The username is doesn't really matter. It's report user. It could be upper or lower, it doesn't matter, right? The password, which is very case sensitive, right? It is report. So it's just report singular. That's our access, right? So I've gone in here before, so it already knows that RPro ODS and report user are the first two values. I'm going to type REPORT, enter, and then it goes and runs the report, and boom, there's the report, right? Okay, so now my formatting in this report is wacky. I'm going to give you that. Like right here, that's a subtotal, but I don't even have the department in this at all, do I? So there's two ways I could fix that. Let's pop back over here and let's do this. So one way, obvious way for me, would be to put the department code here in the line, right? That would be an easy solution. Another option though could be this here. So I'm going to go up here and say, don't suppress. I'm going to go ahead and you know what? You could leave this here and I'm going to leave it here for now. I'm going to leave it here just so you guys see what it does. But I'm going to go ahead and say, format this field, go to font, change my color to white. And then I'm going to right click over here on the side. I'm going to say, go to section expert. And I'm going to say color tab, background color, give me a gray, but give me a really dark gray. Okay, so now we're going to go back to preview, save before you go to preview. All right, so that's one way of doing it. Like I could say, I'm announcing that this is now accessories and that there's my subtotal. Now, if I was going to do that, I should be nice to myself. Like down here, I should go ahead and say section expert, color, give me some background color, but just give me a light gray, you know, and then right click, okay, then right click down here, select all objects and right click again, format these objects to be font size like 9 bold. The other thing I would do here is I would give myself a breath of space. Like I would say, like give me a little space for my eyes to reset, right? So you see what it does now, because my fields are getting cut off. That's awkward. Select all objects, and then I'm holding the shift key and hitting the down arrow a couple of times, right, to make all of them taller together. Or I could have dragged them, I guess, right? Right, so there you see it announces accessories, shows you the items, and then it gives you the subtotal for accessories, right? I probably would still like to have the accessories in the row. It would make more sense to me, right, to have that in there. So I probably would move this over, for instance, shorten this up a little bit and add the DCS in there, right? So back to fields, find the DCS field, DCS code, drop the DCS code in here like that. Let's cut this down here. See, so when you play with these keys a lot, you can move around pretty quickly. Okay, so this has Control Z, so if you accidentally move a field, just Control Z it. So I'm doing Shift left arrow, Control right arrow, right? That's what I'm doing there. Now I'm going to slide these over. Okay, I didn't really want the DCS code. Nice. All right, so I've screwed this up now, right? So now what I need to do is I'm picking the top one. It doesn't matter which one. Line it up and then align the other one to it, right? Now, of course, I should have some column headers, so I'm just going to take text field, copy it, right? I could insert it, but if you insert it, you've got to reformat it to make the same font size and all that. Whereas if you just copy one and change the guts, then it's just that fast, right? So I'm a big fan of copying it. That saves me having to look and see what formatting is on it and reduplicating it and all that. Then we just go ahead and take all three of these and align them to top. And then we've got to line the rest of it up, right? See there, I moved it by accident. Control Z, right click, align left, adjust width. And this just comes to after a while you get used to these tedious mouse clicks. I don't know what else to tell you on that. And it's not pretty here. Select all objects and align top and same height and format objects. They need to be all the same font. So I'm going to go with 8 regular here. Make sure everything's tall enough and save and go back to preview, right? All right, so here you see the company has sold, nice, Control Z. The company sold 280 of these. I sold 0 in that store in that period, right? Now the quantity there is weird. We're going to have to say that that's weird. Why do we have decimals? We have decimals because all quantity has decimals when inserted in Crystal. So you will forget to change it, as I did, and I kind of did that on purpose. I knew that was going to happen, but there are many times when I've done it without doing it on purpose. So in here in font, that's actually wrong. Why? Oh, I don't want to mess with font. Actually, we're in two or three different levels. In number, I'm just going to go to an integer. Now everybody's different on this. Some people like this one here. I usually reserve this one for, like, the comma I reserve for dollars, and without the comma I reserve for quantity. That's the way I do it myself. I just find it's easier. It helps my eyes to understand the data, right? When we're doing it that way. So let's go to the end of the report here. And at the end of the report, my company on hand is too big, but it's a very big number, obviously. And it's got a fractional. We've got some fractional things going on here too. So I could right click. Now in the previewer, you can actually right click and format these things and say, like, I just dropped the fractions. I don't really want to see them. So apparently in that store, I only sold 21 total, right? But you can see that still worked, right? That's the important thing there, that you could do that. So you could roll all your stores up next to each other if I wanted to, right? Anyway, we're having fun now. We're not supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to be working. All right, so hopefully I've beat up the layout and sort pretty well. Although I've dealt with sort, I have not dealt with ranking, right? Ranking is a form of sort. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Now, with these groups that I have in here, if I was going to rank this, I would only be able to rank the SID within the size. So a grouping or the group expert takes precedent over sorting or ranking, right? Now, in this report here, I'm not revealing the class, subclass, vendor code, style, attribute, or size. They're not showing, right? So if I wanted to rank items or styles, depends on what level. We're at the item level right now. Within the department, okay, then what I would need to do is I would need to drop all these middle things. So these were only put in here to drill down in the correct order, to group things first by department, then by class, then by subclass, then by vendor. You get the idea. In this case, if I'm going to rank them, I'm not going to be grouping them, right? So I would then get rid of these so that I could rank within this area here all of these items here. Now, of course, I could be ranking vendors within departments, but we've already got this built. So that being said, I'm going to stick with it, right? So I'm just going to chuck all of these groupings. Okay, so now we only have two groups and it collapses as it should, right? Then up here now, I can go into this group sorting. So I could say, and the easy way to do it is to go to the group you want and say like by the quantity field or by the extended price, we'll stick with quantity. Right here next to the group expert, there is a group sort expert. And then there's a sort expert also. That's for alphabetizing. The group sort expert, since I was on the quantity field, you see that it brought up that item SID level tab on the quantity field for me, right? As opposed to, I'm going to cancel this, take my focus off of that. Let's just put our focus anywhere. And let's go back here. Now I've got to go to the tab myself and I've got to find the field. So it's on the wrong field. So I've got to go and play with it. So it's just easier. I think it's the only way really to go in here and say like on the quantity field on this level. So highlight the field of your choice, click on the group expert and say top N or bottom N or top percentage or whatever, right? So I'm going to say top N, and N is a variable. So right now the variable is set to where N is 5, where N is what, 100? If you want infinity, just put in like 9999. You don't have a 10,000 items in any given department probably. And if you do, you need to clean your damn stuff up. Okay, so that will rank those within, right? So let's go ahead and hit the save button and let's go back to preview land and let's go back to the first page so we can see what the heck's going on. And okay, so within accessories, is it ranking? Yes. Then within whatever this is, APL, I guess, I don't know. So we've got 8, 7, 5, 6, 5, 4. So that's clearly ranking, right, by quantity. All right, excellent. So now, why is the report all choppy? Like, why is this field here so far from that field, and it's much further from this field? And obviously, it's because this field here has been allowed to wrap, right? That's why, which is a choice. Some people like that, and it works really well for them. Some people hate it, and they really hate it. So let's go back over here to the other side. So on this field here, if I right-click this and go to Properties, or Format Field, I should say, in the Common tab, there's Suppressive, Duplicated, and Can Grow. Can Grow is allowed to wrap to the next line thing. Suppressive Duplicated removes it. So if you're going to export to Excel, you do not want Suppressive Duplicated. You want it to repeat on every line. Otherwise, when you get to Excel, you won't have a full record. And so therefore, you won't be able to do a pivot table because it won't know what department that record belongs to, right? So if you don't want those, again, the smart move here would be to highlight, holding the shift key, highlight multiple fields, and right click here, go back to format, and just turn both these off, right? So now I'm going to save that and come back, and now it is dead on, like one line per record, right? But it also cuts off that field, right? So that field's just being truncated. Now, if I wanted to, I could come back here and say, look, I'm going to chuck description 2 for now. So we're going to get rid of description 2, and we're going to take this description 1 back out to its full size so we can see what's in that field. All right, whatever. Sometimes it stops halfway through with the keyboards, and I like the keyboard. All right, so back to preview. Right, so then it's still cutting off because that's a very large field, right? But now it just comes down to like figuring it out. So what I immediately notice, and we're not going to do this, it's to be a waste of time, but there's a lot of room around the extended price, if you know what I'm saying. We could squeeze all this stuff over and line everything up and push it over to the right, and we could make space enough to see that whole full description and maybe even add description 2, right? Especially if description 2 is only a style number. But that's just manipulating the report, right? That's just moving things around in here in Crystal. Okay. All right, so filters versus record select. We got the bestseller, right? We know how to rank. All right, so let's play around with the record select versus filtering. So filtering is when I previewed this, I typed in 3 required fields and I put a date range in, right? That's filtering. So with filtering, you can only filter a report by parameters that are in the report. Now, every report has a query. Now, this parameters are very different than record select, and I want to get to record select in just a second, but I want to make sure we understand parameters. So parameters, we have no control over parameters, okay? Parameters are coming from the query. What query does this use? Oh, well, let me tell you. At the top here under database, it says show SQL query right there in the menu. So if I click in there, because I've already put my subsidiary destination subsidiary number in and my other 2 fields, it pops right into the menu for us. Okay. In here, what you see is our user, report user, right? The package is called report summary. That's from RPro. That package has many procedures. The procedure inside the package is the SPS8 item sum. They've been very generous. They named the procedure the same as they name the RPT file. They don't have to do that, by the way. They did that because it made a lot more sense for us as end users to manipulate and play with these things, right? So if we change that out, we change the parameters, we change the fields, everything. So, and this is over the line. So what I'm going to do is peek at something else here, but I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Now, this is an application that does not come with Crystal. This little thing down here is PLSQL developer and report. And we're not going to go over this. I'm just going to go in here and point, and we're going to get out of it. That's all we're going to do in here. So in here, and this license is nowhere near as expensive as Crystal, and Crystal's not that bad actually. But in here, if we go into here and we find packages, now my package menu is very messy. If you looked at a default RPro package menu, it would have like 7 packages. So I'm just going to warn you up front that I do this all the time, so don't try this at home. But list, that's a default one right there, right? I've copied them and made hack versions of almost everything in here multiple times. But so here's report summary, right? So that one's a default, that one's a default, the other ones here are all around it. And the merchandise and merchandise 1 and 2, list, journal, so there's like an other, so there's like 7 default ones. Anyway, I'm going to right click in here and we're going to go to edit, and in edit, it's going to show us all the procedures inside there. So here's all the procedures, all the different sets of queries that is in that one package, right? And the one we're talking about here today is this one here, SPS8, and then down here is the actual query, and you can see after the these are your parameters. These are define the parameters, or declare, I guess is the right word to use here. They declare your parameters. Then down here it starts the select statement. So here's a standard SQL select statement. Select these fields from those tables. This one is convoluted and nested and painful, so I don't recommend you get in here and play with this unless you're really feeling up to it. But with that, we can help. And that's enough said on that, right? So if you're looking for a field and it's not in there, at that point, I'm going to say reach out to me and let me see if I can like copy that and make another version of it. Now, once you did that, once I sent back to you a package, we would register it into Oracle. We have a little batch file that does that for you. You don't even have to do that. And then you would come up here to the database drop-down menu, and you'd say set database location. So right now, this one's pointing at the default SP S8 item summary. And let's say I wanted to change it to use a custom SP8 S8 item summary. I would then point at the one it's on, open up my RPro ODS, which might require us to put the password in, and it might not. And okay, there it is, opened up. Scroll down, find our user, and then whatever name I gave you. So let's say I gave you an SPS8 that was part of a 94234 custom package. So I would come down here and find the one. Now you wouldn't have anywhere near as many in your menu, right? Your menu would be a lot cleaner than mine is. Unfortunately, it's just gotten this way over time, right? There it is. So in this package, right, this is a copy of Retail Pro's package, and in here is all the other standard packages. But if I hacked the S8 and I added a field, which I've done, by the way, on a number of occasions. I'm not a programmer, but I'm pretty good at hacking a field in. Anyway, you take this, match it to that so that they exactly are the same one, right? Then you say update over here, and you have to put in the criteria required, right? So if you don't put in the required criteria, it doesn't work. And then it sits here and flashes that little button just like it did just now, and you click close, and you're on a new package. So now if I go back up and say show the query, it says I'm using this 94234 version. Now that would modify the procedures potentially. If you had me add a field that wasn't there, like if I wanted to filter by description 4 and it wasn't already there, by the way it is, but if it wasn't there and I added that for you, then over here you'd have to go to set parameter order, and if anything falls below those two, you have to put it above those two, right? That's the deal. Let's come back full circle on that one. Now, side note, if they go off the screen, what I do, there's a trick. There's little arrows up here. See, so you can highlight a field and you can send it up or down, right? So what I do is I just take the header and I send it all the way to the bottom like that. And then I take the footer, wherever it is up here, and I send it all the way to the bottom. And then they're at the bottom in the right order, even if I can't see it. So a handy little trick. Anyway, so, but that's how you would switch a report to use a different parameter and thus have a different group of parameters there available to you. But you got to go through me for that. You're not going to, unless you're going to write SQL and get PLSQL developer or a similar program, you're not going to add parameters. So what can we do? Well, we can do a record select. So let's say that in looking at this report, I only want to see items that are more than 5. Okay, I don't want to see the onesie twosies. I just want to see the heavy hitters out there. Why? That's because that's what I feel like. So up here at the top, I could go into, and let's get our focus in the right place here. Again, I'm going to be on the quantity field. You don't have to be, you could select it, by the way, but I'm going to go in here and say select record. So under report here at the top, select expert, there's group and record. I'm going to go to record, and I'm going to go down and find me the quantity field. Okay, there's the quantity field. Okay, so now I have a quantity on the tab, and I say is any value, is equal to, is not equal to, is one of, is less than, is greater than 5, right? And okay. And then the wise person would click back in there and just check out the query right here at the bottom, right? Make sure it populates correctly. I've had people move too quickly and not click the OK button correctly and not get the query to right. So I make a habit of going in and looking at it. You can, if you wanted to make that more complicated, you could click the formula editor here and open it up, and you could actually build your own formula here, which we're not going to do. That's enough right there. So we're going to go ahead and say OK again. We're going to save this. We're going to go back over here to preview. It takes a second now. Now, none of the quantities in this column should be less than 5, right? No onesies. And of course, it changed the numbers because we excluded a bunch of items, right? So that the totals changed here, which is appropriate, right? Also, these things here, I don't find a great value in most of these. There are some cool graphs and stuff you can do. I just don't find the default ones good. So I'm clicking on them and pressing the delete key on the keyboard, and I'm probably, pulling this up like that. I would get rid of this here, delete. I would go up and insert an image picture, right? And then I would find the picture of our choice. Okay, we'll just use Yosemite Conservancy is doing an upgrade right now. So we'll just but I would go get your own graphic, the point is, and I would make this nice. The report titles is too small in almost all the reports. Make it bigger. That way when you name the report, it won't cut off, right? I also do other things which are not really critical. So we're at 36 past, so we got a little bit of time. I oftentimes take these parameters right here and I right click them and I go to format and change the font down to 6. I'm all for having those print, but let's face it, they are the fine print, and I would prefer it if they were actually fine print and not in my way. I know, tell me how you really feel, right? Let's go ahead and save that, and let's go try it out here. Okay, I just minimized the whole session. We were trying to minimize this, much better. Okay, so now I've been editing the heck out of this. It's got a nice fresh edit time. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go dump it back into that report folder, and we are going to run it. Now, when I run it, Oracle is going to see that it has been modified. So back in here now, if I say run this report and I say OK, it's going to pop up and say the report file on the disk is newer than the one in the Oracle database. Do you want to go ahead and update it in the database? Well, yes, I do. Thank you. Boom. So now this one in the report was filtered to only Nike, but in the report I filtered it to only things that sold more than 5, right? Now, if you're going to do a record select, now you see at the top here I'm going to blow this up a little bit. You see at the top here the filter criteria, how small it is now, and I like that. I like that a lot. If I want to look at the fine print, I'll look at it, but I don't need it spacing out at 10 pitch and taking the quarter of the page. You know what I mean? I know what I filtered for. Thank you. So if you're going to put a hard-coded filter in like we just did, a record select, right? Then the wise person here would go ahead and make a statement to that effect. So I just go up here and copy this first criteria header, and I just paste it in there like this. And then I just change this to say, company QTY greater than 5, right? And then you might put in parentheses, record select dash like hard coded or something, you know what I mean? Or you could phrase that however you want to, right? It doesn't really matter. As long as you get the point across that the end user can't change that, right? That's hard coded in the report now, and it's not an option at runtime to manipulate. And format text, font, regular, okay, save, minimize, and that is sitting in here, right? I should have just edited the one right there in the folder, probably would have been smarter, huh? Out, okay, so copy this here. Again, go back to my Retail Pro 9 reports, other folder, and paste it in there, overwrite the file, and go back and run this again, run, okay, yes, we want to accept the changes. If you don't see this, you did not make your changes and save it to the right spot, right? It's running an old copy. right? See, so now if we blow this up a little bit again, I could move that over. I'm not going to bother. I should have put the closing bracket on that thing too, but don't worry, you get the idea, right? So if I was going to clean that up, I'd move it over and put the bracket on there and slide it over next to filter criteria, and it would just print every time you run it. So, okay, got a few minutes left. Let's see what else we have on our list. I've been moving like a rocket ship here, racing through these things. If there are any questions you guys have, raise your hand or put it in the chat, or let me know you want me to unmute you. I'll unmute you in a quick second. I'm all for communication, although I can be a bit of a steamroller and a bit of a workaholic. So those of you who've worked with me know that I just keep going. So, but always feel free to throw something in the chat or interrupt me and stop it, and we will dig into whatever we need to dig into. Yes, I want to close this. Okay, so back down here then. Okay, so I think we've really sort of touched base on all these things here, right? Before I moved on to report scripts and scheduling and emailing and stuff, which really all this stuff you really sort of need to get some files from us and probably have a tech walk you through it the first time. Once you have one of these set up and running, you could easily duplicate it over and over again. That won't be a problem. But I'm going to point out something here that is kind of useful. In version 8, a merchandise is a merchandise, a summary is a summary, a journal is a journal. That's it. I mean, because that's hard-coded flat file reporting. And it's very powerful, extremely powerful, but also there are some hard limits. Like you can't do formulas, you can't do calculations, you can't say this year minus last year divided by last year to show percent of increase, right? You can't do that stuff. Also, you can't get like receipt transaction counts. That's easy to do now in version. See if I can even find one here. Associate summary. Let's try this one here. Okay, so in here you see I've got a transaction count right here, and actually that's a field, isn't it? Wow, that's exciting. All right, so let's just do this. Let's close this. That's actually a great report, by the way, but that's not why we're here. Let me just go and try something here. I want to do something real fast. So let's go over to journals, and let's just take a journal, J1 sales, RTJL is your basic journal. And in here, if I want to know, like right in this report, and they've done some wacky formatting in here with the graying of the field here. It drives me nuts. But okay, receipt number. I'm going to go ahead and turn that color off. It's just killing me. Okay, so right here, receipt number is the column header. I float over, it says receipt number, right? So then I think I've already done it here. I must have been here before. If I wanted to know how many of those we had, right, I could right click this and I could say insert a summary, right? But it's not going to be a sum. I don't want to add receipt number 123 to receipt number 456. I want to do a distinct count, right, to the grand total. Boom, there's a count that fast. And then if I wanted to, and I could insert that to any level, by the way, we could go back to our grouping and we could group this by store. It is grouped by store, so I could have grouped that to level 2 right here, right? I could go like this, in fact. And if I then had my quantity there, I could divide and find out how much in a formula. What's the units per transaction, right? Not a big deal. We've done that, by the way. So that kind of stuff we've got in here under the BHD custom reports. And we won't go deeply into these because we could spend time in here and it would be just time we don't have to spend right now. So this one right here, I'm just going to run this. Again, I'm in a sandbox. I'm not going to put a date range in, and I'm going to just let that roll. And you see here we've got number of transactions, total number of items, average quantity per transaction, extended price, average dollars per transaction, by name. Now, in some of these here are V8 data that came up that don't have names. We never put them in V9. Other ones we put these native records in V9 and it pulls the actual name from the employee entry. So, and of course, if you want to go totally nuts, I made a bigger version that gets just over the line really with stuff. But there you go. So this is exactly the same stuff, right? Units per transaction, quantity, the number of transactions, average daily sale, ADS. I put the chart up here because the person who had me write this, they're really brilliant people, but they wanted all these acronyms that not everybody totally gets. So, I mean, AUR and UPTs are actually pretty standard, but average discounts per transaction, that's kind of odd. But hey, it's not a bad thing to see. So in here, we put all these stats in here. We put some hours. If you use the timesheet, the time clock, you get the hours. And then we put penetration on the right to see what percentage of what store, right? So it just kind of goes overboard, but it's good. It's good to dig into the data. So you can do all that though in Crystal Reports. I mean, it's all possible. Just a matter of finding the right package that has the right fields and doing the math, right? Okay. So let's talk about scheduling a report and how we would go about that and what options there are in that realm if there are no questions, and I don't see any questions as of yet. So to schedule a report, you need a script. So in V8, we would make a group and we would run some command line parameters, but they greatly opened up the command line parameters and made them extremely flexible. So that being said, I am going to go see if I can find a script here that we can look at. Okay, there's an example of a script right there, edit. So let's make this a little bigger because damn, I can barely see that. So I'm thinking we need to blow it up a little bit. Is that too much? It's not too much, just on the edge, but not too much. So let me break this out for you real quick here. This at the top, this is a kill statement. That's all this is. So, I mean, we would just give you this file, right? I would just send this over to you. If we are running reports and we go home and we leave reports open and my schedule comes up to run and report automatically, it's going to bring the reports application to the forefront, make it be the active window. It's not going to run my report. So it needs to launch reports and run its task and close. Normally, that's how you run a report with a scheduled command line parameter situation. So before I run reports, we just make sure reports is closed. If it's open, that thing kills it. That's all that is. Then we do a little timeout here, no big deal. And then right here, this is just a log entry. This says take the date and time and write it to a log called weeklylog.txt so I know when this thing started and when it stopped, right? Then this is the actual command here that runs it. So this thing says run reports using these credentials, which you may have to make up your own credentials, or you could use sysadmin, but if you use sysadmin, then you end up changing your admin password, your report stops running. So got to be careful on that one. The best thing is to go create a group in your security for reports that has full access to run reports, but not access to edit inventory. Then you could just put those credentials in here in plain text, and yes, someone could right click and edit and they could see what the password is, but they would only be able to run reports, right? That's all they'd get. Then in here, this is the report name. This is not the file name. This is the report name. So here, what I would do, if I was running this report or any other report, I would click edit, I would copy this here, do a control C, right? I would control C that, then I would cancel this. I don't want to accidentally change that name, right? And then I would pop back in here and I would paste that in there. Control Victor. I don't take a chance on mistyping that in there. If I want to call that report up, I want to call that report up, right? Then this tells us what menu it's in. That's not in the other menu. That is in the custom menu, right? This says how to export it right here. So I'm saying I wanted to export it to PDF versus say Excel or Excel TXT or just TXT or HTML. There's different ways to export this. This command here is saying where to put this. So it's saying on the R drive, there's a reports folder, and inside there, there's a weekly folder. I want to save this Excel text or PDF to this folder. This next piece over here, and I guess we are a little bit too big, aren't we? This just says where the RPT file can be found. The RPT file is sitting in the other folder. And then it's just got the run silent commands added on to the end, so it doesn't interfere with anybody who might be actually there. Yeah, like anybody's going to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Anyway, so typically we would take one of these, we would tweak it to match our needed values, right? Then we would go down and we would go to the Windows task scheduler, which if we type task correctly, Windows can usually find. And in the task scheduler, we would have to add a task. So in here, if you don't have a Retail Pro library, then on the library, you can right click and you can add a new folder. Not on the root, by the way. I bumped into that painfully at one point. Anyway, in here, then you would then right click and say, create a new task. And we already got one in here, so I'm just going to double click it and take a look at it. You have to deal with the general, the trigger, and the action. The first three is all you have to do. But on the general, we have to say run whether a user is logged in or not, and run with the highest privileges, right? That's what we do here, and we give it a name. A name is important for us humans. Trigger, we click new here, or in my case, I'm going to click edit. Maybe not. And we tell it how often and when we're going to run, right? So I'm running this one monthly on the first day of each month for all months, right? We could run this daily, we could run it weekly, we could say, weekly Mondays, right? I usually add this down here, stop task from running if it takes longer than 30 minutes. 30 minutes is the lowest setting you can put in there. So it should not take more than 2 minutes probably. Maybe a big report might take 5 or 10, but 30 is pretty much over the line, right? Unless you got enormously large data. So you set the date and time, how you want to run it, and okay, you got your trigger. Then actions would be, this is set up for version 8, so I'm going to go ahead and edit this here. So this would be, all this would be is browse, and we would browse to, now let's just do this right actually. I'm just going to pause this right here, close that. Let's pop back in here. So if I was really going to run this, what I would do is I would copy this and I would put this in my Retail Pro folder. So I would go to C, Retail Pro 9, reports. Now, this could be anywhere, okay? This could literally be anywhere, but don't do that. Create structure that you can follow up on, right? So I would say new folder, and I would say like batches, right? These were batch files, by the way. That's what they're called. And I would right click and paste that in there. And then back here in my task scheduler, right, I would say action, browse, and I would go get that in that folder. So let's go to our C drive. Let's go to Retail Pro 9. Let's go to reports. Hope everybody's still awake. I know it's pretty dry stuff. Batches, there it is, boom, right? And of course it would not have these command line parameters because all the parameters are inside there, right? I don't need any of those. That's why we wrote a batch file, because there's too many parameters to put in a 1-inch square correctly, right? So then I want this to start in my start folder, would be the batches folder, right? So I'm just going to Control C that and then Control Victor it down in here, right? There we go. That's how you schedule it. So now, real quick here, let's take a look at one other aspect. Let's go back over to this directory, and we can drop these files in the batch file that I have here and the these other email files could be dropped in, and we're not going to set the email thing up, but I'll point to where it is and how it gets set up real quick so we can understand it. In here, I've got groups of files. So this file here, this autoreps.txt and this bhd auto email, these go together. This executable always looks for that file on the root of the C drive. And in here, I've got more sets of these. So one goes with one, weekly goes with weekly, daily goes with daily. You get the idea. Okay. So inside this auto reports .txt, we put in parameters on what email account we're using, who we want to send it to, what the key phrase in the reports is. So like if all my reports have in my naming convention, when I named and copied and named my report, I started it with BHD, right? So if all my reports, the file name contains BHD, that's my key. Anything that's got that key in the file name, I need you to email, right? And then we put in, you know, whatever password we need here, right? So this is how we do this. We put this file on the root of that thing. Then we would take this thing here, we would copy this, and we would put this again in a place that provides structure for us downstream, right? So we know where to look if something breaks. Because again, you could put this anywhere, and our tech is not going to know where you put it unless you put it in a folder like batches under reports, right? And if we go in here and say paste, then I would go in here and say, okay, after that runs, now the text file that goes with that would have to be on the root of the C. The root of the C would be that auto reports file, and it would tell it how to run and get that email, right? Anyway, once that was done and set up, and you'd have to have a Gmail account set up, by the way, with third party. You have to turn off, you have to turn down your security setting. That's what you have to do. There's a allow third party apps. I forget the phrase. But in here, then back in actually in here, what I would do then is I would add another new task, and I would say, I start a program, and I would browse to here, and I would grab the email, right? And I would say start in the same place, by the way. Yeah, it'd be too easy, wouldn't it? Right, like that. So now this would run the report, and this here would then kick the email, and the text file in the back here in the text file. This is a lot right here. I get it. This is a lot, but really, I don't think I could show this to you really well unless I set it up on your computer and you actually could then see it run. And once you saw it working, then you could see the mechanics of it and you could easily reproduce this. This wouldn't be that hard once you had one running up and running. Anyway, in here, obviously, this would have to be set to the R drive in the reports weekly folder, right? This is where you tell it where to go get that, right? Right. So you'd have to say, look, go to that folder, pick up everything in there that's got a BHD in the file name, right? And email it. And if you've connected it to your email correctly, you know, if you've got your username here is correct and it's all set up in Gmail and your password down here is correct also, then it emails. Now you want to set up a new Gmail account that is not in use, that only sends and does not receive, if that makes sense. Like, because if you have to turn less secure apps, you have to turn on less secure apps. That's the application setting that has to be done for your Gmail account. And what you do is you sign in, you make a Gmail account, whatever, bhdreports@gmail.com. And once you're signed into it, you click a new tab and say search for less secure apps. It finds the Gmail app setting, and you just turn it on, and then it works. Then you put in the credentials into this little text file and say what the user is, or usery, depending on how you spell user. And and connect it up, and it fires off. It's pretty simple. All right, so I hope that's been helpful and informative, and this has been recorded, and I will convert it and get it up on the web for everyone. Anybody have any final questions or anything I didn't cover correctly before I take off and go get some food? Well, all right then. I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope again this has been useful. And you should get an email from. Thank you guys very much, Robert, David. Um, we should get an email from Mary in service. It takes about a day for me to get it out. We got to convert it, and then I got to upload it, and then Mary will send out a link to everybody who was on there, and you can then go watch it again in all of its splendor, right? All right, you guys, stay safe. Everybody stay home. Nobody needs to be going out, right? We all need to be staying safe. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.